Okay, so this is IIT Bombay, and I'm sure you would have seen the pictures. And today I'm going to talk about tricycle for paraplegics. And of course, in this wonderful conference called Triple ID Mobility Days, and mobility is the space that really interests me, and therefore I'm here today. Um, of course, I will indeed talk about tricycle for paraplegics, and uh, my talk will be more of a storytelling, the way I have sort of taken the entire journey, the process that I followed, also the deviations from the process, what is so the way it is taught through the textbooks, and why such deviations were required, the struggle, and also the kind of rewards that you get doing such projects. Um, few years back, close to 9 years back, uh, there was one gentleman who walked into my office, and he was vice president of a corporate house. And he wanted me to redesign the tricycle for, bottom of the pyramid people. Uh, and that was essentially his interest because they were also doing this corporate social responsibility work. But he also gave a very interesting brief. He says that you don't have to redesign, change anything in the tricycle, but all you need to do is that you have to make it cheaper. And I said, that's nothing. That's kind of thing is never taught to us, that you have to make things cheaper. We work on the problems and we try to solve those problems. In the process, if the things have to be made cheaper, we make them cheaper. Um, I really didn't like the word cheaper, and I think this is something that probably Indians also don't like so much. They like the word economical, but I think the cheaper is something which is little. And in the technology sense, there is a word called value engineering. So essentially, he was wanting me to do the value engineering of a product. So I refused. However, I sat on, and in my mind, this project really sat in my head, and I was trying to rethink about all the projects that I have done in the past. And I connected with my own Master of Design class assignment. This was not even a project, class assignment, which I did many years back, or close to 20 years. And we designed this recumbent, in tandem tricycle. And I had this enormous fun making this, designing this, fabricating this, you know. And I said to myself that if I can do this, and I also had developed the fun, the interest in developing the recumbent bicycles. So I knew where I was in terms of understanding of bicycles. Of course, my journey has come. I mean, my start actually happened in the industry. I started with, at Bajaj Auto, designing motorcycles and scooters, and then went to designing cars. So my process essentially has been the top down, or more funnel down process, where you take the needs and then you start to work towards the mass production paradigm. However, I was also aware of this iterative process where you keep changing things and keep playing with it so that you solve certain problems. But till this time, I was still doing more for fun, something which was faster and, easy to drive, pedal, etc. And this is when, after a couple of years, we got some funding from Ministry of Human Resources to develop tricycle for paraplegics. And this is very interesting image because it also juxtaposes with the current tricycle, which is sort of ubiquitous in our country. It is seen everywhere in the country. You have this tricycle, which is next to my tricycle, is a makeshift, improvised version of the bicycle components. You just join them up, and this is in existence for many decades. And as a designer, as a sensitive designer, I also believe that we cannot disregard a product which has remained or stayed in existence for many years. There must be something about it. So obviously the first thing that comes to your mind, what is great about this product, is that the cost is really contained. So that's again becomes a sort of baseline for us. At the same time, you need to really go out in the field and understand what people have in terms of their issues and concerns. Um, so we did enormous research. We found a lot of interesting adaptations of the same tricycle. If you see, there's a roof comes up on it, and there are also two pedals. And it's needless to mention that you can't pedal and steer at the same time. You need a third hand if you have to pedal with both hands, and also steer. So obviously, this is required when there is very interesting emergency coming in front of you, and you want great initial torque and you want to push it forward. So you do that, ignoring the maneuverability, and then you do that and then come back to the normal. Um, so we started to observe these things, and you know, and also different interpretations. So this was in Kolkata, similar sort of thing, except that maybe in some places you'll see the rear view mirror coming in, maybe some colors coming in, more fabric here and there, and the boxes, and you get to see some more boxes, and we also realized that many of these tricycles. Then we started to understand the whole dynamics of how the tricycle distribution really works. So you need to have a certification that you're disabled from the government, and once you have that certification done, if you have the certificate, and any government organization or NGOs, if they have to distribute, you need to show that certificate that you're such and such disabled, and you are entitled to get that one. And we noticed in Mumbai and many big cities, there are also a lot of people who don't have home. They are homeless, and they live on these tricycles. So this example that you see in front of us, it's in Kolkata, and this person actually lives with this entire paraphernalia. This entire thing is actually his house. And similarly, you'll see lots of them everywhere in India, also in Mumbai also. Um, so when we did this very in-depth research with the users, and I was telling to myself that it's a serious project and needs a lot of sensitivity. And at the same time, I also realized that one has to just fall back on the design thinking process. And if you're solid, if you have a solid foundation in that, I think you can still do it. So when we approached Paraplegic Foundation in Mumbai, we realized that we of course did a lot of interviewing, and we also did a lot of observational research. But there are also a lot of other things which were not so much observable unless you really go into the situation more strongly. Now, this picture is something that I keep showing to a lot of my students also. Now, the fact that it is a one-side pedaling, you also notice that the backbone also gets bent over a period of time, and this is irreversible. Though he has a mobility aid, though he has an enabler which will take him from one place to another, but his vertebra or his backbone will also get bent, and the spinal, and he'll get very bad pains over a period of time. Now, this, as a designer, one gets to see this, observe this, and also see what can happen to that. And as a result, what can we do so that there is a change in the behavior of the design of the user, or change in the way he or she uses the product. And more closely, when we started to look at the issues, and there's a lot of stories came in. This lady, for example, she fell from the wheelchair when she was transferring from wheelchair to the tricycle. She fell there, and there was nobody around, and she was there for close to 2.5 hours, because if your legs are completely immobile, and if there is no life in it, it's almost virtually impossible for you to go from ground level to any height, even if it is 1 foot of height or 1.5 feet of height. So she stayed there and until somebody heard her crying, and they helped her. So these stories really helped us. These helped us understand the thing more clearly. And we did a lot of research and spent a lot of time with the users, and we made a conclusion that, and also the very first one is the providing a new identity for mobility. I know this is very interesting, because when we were speaking to a lot of people, a lot of students in IIT, and those who have lower limb disabilities, we realized that many of them were not using the donated tricycles to them. They were not using. They were, I mean, all these tricycles were lying, in one corner. And I was very curious. In fact, one of our PhD students, who I knew earlier also, and I asked him, why you don't use it? And he said that even in my Bachelor of Architecture days in the other university, they had given me this tricycle, but I don't use it because the moment I use it, I'm seen as a disabled. So I don't want to be seen as a disabled. So I want to live like a normal life. So he uses crutches, he struggles, but then he doesn't want to use tricycle because it's a big symbol of disabled people. And that's something that he was not really very keen on. And similarly, lots of others also did the same stuff. Um, Apart from that, there was this entire list of things that we found were very critical when we sort of attempted to design. So it had to be lightweight, it had to be a compelling option. An ergonomically designed structure, I already mentioned about the bent, backbone and the other issues. The legs lay hanging, so you need to strap them up. You need to make sure that they are sort of. So none of these problems, if you notice, I mean, ease of transfer from wheelchair, crutches to the mobility devices. And Mumbai is also a context where there are 4 months of rainfall, and it was never considered, because obviously when you add up a roof on it, there's a cost, and therefore the donators, because it's essentially the donation oriented delivery or distribution. So donors don't find that to be cost effective. So they don't really put the roofs. In fact, nobody has designed any kind of roof also. Because of very varied injuries and the body sizes, there are also there we were forced to introduce seat adjustability, even though it involves a lot of cost. Because the lower limb is, if it is amputated completely from the pelvic region, your height, your eye line goes very down. And if it is just polio or any other sort of disease, then your pelvic still stays okay. So you need to give enough seat adjustability to your tricycle, which essentially involves a lot of, I mean, on the way it involves a lot of things, because it involves tube to tube movement and up and down and sideways and backwards. So but when we were looking at the issues, we tried to look at all kinds of issues, just because we just wanted to make sure that we give the ideal tricycle. Some initial advantage, because when you have both arms used, which we learned from the tricycle, which had the both pedals, that there is definitely a lot of initial thrust or a torque that is given to the tricycle. And then, of course, access to all controls without shifting hands. Um, there's also another thing which we're still working, is that if you're using a tricycle like this motion, you should also be, over a period of time, I mean, after it moves swiftly, you can move it to more rhythmic form of motion, which is more intuitive. And we are working on the mechanism of that. And then locking of brakes when not in use in the slopes. There are lots of cases when it is on the slope, the things people when they stop it, there are chances that they might uh, fall, or the vehicle just starts moving. And of course, multiple drives and climbing up slopes. And so the reason I'm saying you all this is that these are the problems that we identified, and we thought we made a promise to ourselves that we will work on all of these, irrespective of the fact that we will. I mean, of course, we were funded by ministry to make prototypes and all that, but obviously we didn't have any sort of promise to the manufacturers. I think the promise of manufacturer, when it comes to the picture, then certain things need a lot of changes. And as we always do, we started building prototypes, quick and dirty ones, started playing with it. And needless to say, we failed terribly. Um, the uh, the right hand side prototype that you see with these two bars it's a kind of reflection of my frustration, we wanted this to be absolutely clear for the legs to move in, because the legs have no life. Um, However, the structure became weak, and it required welding all the time. And it is just an indication to me that this is the easiest way that we could solve the problem, just to triangulate it, and the structure is complete. However, we just kept on working on it, and we created little better. This was the very first um, uh, image of the product that had everything that we had promised to ourselves. There's a box at the back, there's a roof on the top, and it's a CAD model. You have this very interesting motion. The handlebar has not only the drive, it also has the brakes, and it also helps you maneuver. So it becomes one big sort of zone where everything is sort of coming in. And the drive is on the front wheel, which was very different from the other ones, because the other ones had the drive at the back. Of course, it became lighter, and the challenges actually start to happen when you start building these. Obviously, India. Now, let me also give you a context. India is also a very large bicycle manufacturing country, which means that we manufacture a lot of bicycles. I mean, each company, each bicycle giant, I mean, they manufacture close to 40 to 50,000 bicycles a day, which means that if you multiply that by 3 giants, so you have, quite a lot of 150,000 bicycles being produced every day. That also essentially means that the cost of components is contained and very less. However, the culture of bicycle building is not so much there in our country, comparing, Europe and US for that matter. So the handcrafting of bicycles, it doesn't exist. So we had to rely on the manufacturers who would make the bent tube furnitures. So this was something that which we learned on the way. We sat with them, and of course, the kinds of tolerances and things that they work on, very different from what we were expecting. And if you see on the downside, I mean, the left-hand side corner, our main ambition was to make everything in a box, so that it's not subjected to, roadside sort of assembly and disassembly. You can just have somebody who knows. It's more like an IKEA furniture, that somebody, you know, who's, like, say 2000 or 100, 1500 kilometers from Mumbai, places an order. We send the shipment, and he opens, and with the help of his friends, can just build the bicycle. That was the idea. And then we started working on the prototype, and this was the very first prototype. And as I said, it's an iterative process, and a lot of times you feel that you've done good job, but then it also gives you a lot of issues, and people didn't notice, but I was noticing it a lot, that there was, the frame was not as strong as it should have been, and there was a bit of, the thing was bending a little, near the feet. So we did, some testing with the users, and we got some feedback, and again started to relook at the frames, so that the frames could have been stronger. And I think now this is also very interesting, because many times we feel that as designers we are only supposed to work on giving forms. I think if we sort of look at the issues, and if your intentions are right, I think it is also possible that you can come out with even the structures. And I think this is how I would explain how we did with our project. Now, this is the structure that we designed, and we also sort of ensured that this structure was stronger. So there is a central spine which goes all the way behind and also connects with the rear unit subassembly. But it tends to become very strong. But then the other thing started to happen, that the upper portion became a little flimsy. So we started working around that. And we also wanted to keep it artistic, nicer, cleaner, aesthetically pleasing. So we had these very interesting notions in our heads, that it has to be strong, and it also needs to be aesthetically very pleasing. This was our first presentation which we gave to the people who were funded, and they really kind of liked it. And at this point, we also we thought that, now we have to go and make a, we have to leapfrog now, and I think it needs a lot more focus. And let me bring in all my learnings of even vehicle design for that matter. And we started to work on the idea of confidence, and we branded it as a confitrike, the confidence with the tricycle. It's a combination. And the image that started to appear in the CAD was this. And if you notice that it has almost everything. It has even, we have even tried to package the crutches that will go along. And then there is a box at the back, and there's a light in the front, all kinds of things, everything that a person would need. And under the seat, there is also a little box where it's a lockable box, where you can keep certain things. So even if somebody who is a homeless and would like to use it, he still can use it. Rainfall, protected bicycle. And now this is again one interesting learning that we had, that in India we have a lot of auto rickshaws. If my friends from abroad, if they have seen the visuals or if they have experienced in India, there are a lot of these auto rickshaws, and some people also call them tuk-tuks because of course, Bangkok tuk-tuks. So then the canopy on the top on the auto rickshaws is done by, the seat makers, of roadside seat makers. They have, these small little shops, and they buy these resins and leather, cheap leather, and then they just build that down. And they also make sure that it is stretched well and all that. So we approached them, we sat with them, we collaborated with them. So it's my learning was that more you collaborate with the available resources, better it would result into a great product, and easier it will result into a better product. And this is precisely what we did with our tricycle. And this is typically this is the exploded diagram of our vehicle and how the entire thing will package in the box. Of course, when we make something, we want to ensure that it is enduring and it's rugged. So all the technical stuff was done and ensured that everything is fine. The structural analysis was done. And that is when we created, by this time, it was already 2 years spent. The maximum time was spent with the vendors, with the manufacturers, with the prototypers, because I think they were also learning on the way. And this is the first time when we gave the tricycle to the real users who had disabilities. And we became a little more confident after building this prototype that now we can actually give it to the right. So what we learned on the way is that if we give pre-cooked sort of concept to people, there are chances that you will not get the right kind of feedback. So we gave this, which we were confident, we became confident, and then we got very nice feedback. And our image of the product also kept on improving. And that's how the whole thing would look like. And this is the prototype that I showed already. And then we went to the Paraplegic Foundation again, and we gave a tricycle to them. And I'll just show you some videos of the usage. Mandar told me that it works better if I use the YouTube. So here, if you guys can. So we gave it to the people in the Paraplegic Foundation and the people who actually struggle every day with their own tricycles. And we were very happy when they started using it. when you have your own concept being used by the user, it gives you immense satisfaction. But as I said, that we always approach this with very open mind. And of course, initially they had a lot of trouble understanding there, because there is also a lot of cognitive load, because the fact that when you realize that there are two handles, and everything actually happens on the two handles. With the brake, the brakes happen on the on the two hands, and then maneuverability also happens in the two hands. So you become little nervous. But I think once you come out of that nervousness, people tend to become little more okay. And right now he's mentioning that, because he's not used these kinds of things, these kinds of movements, so he's saying that I'm feeling little pain here. But he's also himself, he himself is saying that after few, I'm sure after a couple of rounds it'll also go, and I'll be fine. And he was very excited about it. And he was excited, in fact, there's a very interesting story, and I would like to say here is that, you know um, uh, there is, outside the Paraplegic Foundation, there is a flyover, and with a normal tricycle they would always require somebody to give a push from the back, and they would move on that, so he could climb that. So that's not the real story. The story is that he actually was going, and the people did not honk from the back, and the fact that people did not honk, he felt little uneasy. He says that, you know today, no, sorry, he felt very happy. He says that today people did not honk, which means I'm seen as a normal person, so as a normal citizen of the country. Because the moment they see the old tricycles, they always honk for some reasons, because they just feel that uh, it's not a good thing to have a tricycle in front of you. So that was like little weird for us to also understand that. But that's how it has it really sort of came up as an interesting insight. um, so we gave to a lot of other people, and a lot of very positive feedback, a lot of interesting feedback. But as I said, as I always keep saying, that there is always some bit of failure we should be very happy to talk about. And I think the failure came uh, from the perspective of women. There were three women who used the product, and uh, interestingly, only one of them really liked it, two of them did not. uh, and the reasons, one of the very important reasons that came up was that they felt the vehicle was too big and too overwhelming, too large, too difficult, uh, you know and they carried this notion in their minds. However, it was completely opposite with with the men, because they felt that it's far easier to drive than the other ones. I think the canopy thing, the entire volume of the vehicle was making it too overwhelming and large. Um, I don't have an answer to that, whether we have solved that problem. No, we have not. We are still working on it. Such projects never finish. So, uh, so this is one interesting aspect of it. We've also been asked by a lot of people that you should make a children version. This is not really children version. One very nice girl, she saw it in our tech fest, and in fact, a lot of children, they just came to this particular tricycle, and they thought it's a fun vehicle, and they just wanted to have a ride on that. However, there seems to be a lot of need for children, the tricycle for children. We made the electric version, though reluctantly, because there's a huge pressure that everybody wants electric version, and we made something which is not even electric, not fully manual. It's a pedal assist, and it worked fantastically. The structure, I mean, it was a blessing in disguise that the structure really worked for our one sec, I'll just show you. Yeah. So when you pedal, it just moves forward. That way, you give exercise to your upper limbs. Um, and I want to draw your attention here that this particular slope is actually quite a big slope in IIT. You are going actually to the hillside, but the vehicle really goes very smoothly and swiftly. Um, However, this was not the main plan. The main plan is still uh, to uh, make most effective hand pedaled tricycle, not the but this we did on the way as a part of as an exercise. And we understand that this probably is the future, but this is terribly expensive. So we are not yet fully prepared to go there. But I just keep showing it to the people, because the obvious question that keeps coming back to us is that why not electric, so I think I've taken way too much time, but let me just close it. We have shown it to the various expos, etc. We're working on it. We are working on the distribution model of it. We were also approached by one parathlete, and she was like, she wanted to take it to very high altitude in the Himalayas. Our tricycle, I refused. I said we did design for endurance, and but she is very keen. She has given a lot of insights to us, and I personally think that there is a lot of future for a lot of scope for designing tricycles or bicycles or even wheelchairs for the parathletes, which we have not done much in our country. Some pictures of how we've displayed in various expos. So this is how we currently we are. It was supported by MHRD and networked with a lot of component manufacturers. Various protos are made. We tried electric version, and the last point which I want to close with is that we are kind of reluctant. We have to become entrepreneur in this, because there's no other way out. And I'm sort of reluctant entrepreneur here, because we spoke to a lot of bicycle manufacturing companies, and I think my next slide will really sum it up, what I want to say when it comes to the mass manufacturing. I also write a lot of haikus. I publish every day one haiku in the LinkedIn, Insta, and Facebook. And one haiku which I wrote long back, and I think it sums up the entire thing, is that it also sort of tells my frustration and my reluctance to be businessman, is that making wheelchairs is not making business sense. We need more customers. I mean, that's a very sad part of mass manufacturing, because people want more customers, more buyers, and unfortunately, we can't afford more customers who are paraplegic. So with that, I would like to close my presentation. Thank you so much for offering this brilliant opportunity to speak to all of you in this wonderful conference. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you all.
Thank you.